They were cast out, caged. Humanity, the boisterous, unpredictable, and terrifyingly ambitious child of the galaxy, was sent to its room for a timeout measured in millennia. The sentence was not death, for the ancient species of the Galactic Concordance considered themselves far too civilized for simple genocide. No, their solution was more elegant, more absolute. They built a prison around a star, a shimmering, impenetrable cage of warped space-time called the Quantum Veil, which severed the Sol system from the rest of the universe. No signal could get in, and nothing, absolutely nothing, could get out. Humanity was banned from the stars, left to contemplate its supposed sins in solitary confinement. The year of the exile was 3427 by human reckoning. High Counselor Valerius of the Cygnian Ascendancy, a being of crystalline light and slow, deliberate thought, addressed the assembled members of the Concordance. His voice was not sound, but a direct telepathic resonance that echoed in the minds of 1,000 delegates from 1,000 worlds. "The human anomaly has been contained," he projected, his tone one of serene, unshakable authority. Their chaotic expansion, their reckless technological leaps, their volatile emotions, these are a contagion that threaten the great balance we have maintained for eons. They are a fever that, left unchecked, would have burned the galaxy. We have not destroyed them. We have merely isolated them, allowing the galactic body to heal. In time, they will either learn the quiet wisdom of restraint, or they will consume themselves in their own fire. Either way, the galaxy is safe. There was a general resonance of approval. The Concordance was made up of ancient, slow-evolving species. They measured their progress in geological time. Their decisions weighed against the history of dying stars. Humanity, by contrast, had gone from splitting the atom to splitting space-time in less than 1,000 years. They built empires in the time it took a Cygnian to form a single new thought. They were terrifying. The Quantum Veil was, to the Concordance, a necessary act of cosmic quarantine. A single fleet, the Shield of Balance, was left to stand vigil, a silent guard outside the shimmering prison, a reminder to the rest of the galaxy of the price of unchecked ambition. And then, silence. For 5,000 years, the Sol system was a ghost, a dead node on the galactic charts. The Shield of Balance became a ceremonial post, a quiet backwater for commanders nearing retirement. The story of humanity faded from active memory into legend, then into a dusty footnote in the Concordance's vast historical archives. They were the boogeymen used to scare young species into behaving, a lesson in cosmic hubris. The galaxy moved on, serene and orderly, just as Valerius had intended. But in the year 8427, something changed. A minor technician aboard the Concordance watch station, a young Lorian with sensitive energy-perceptive antennae, noticed a flicker. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible anomaly on the surface of the Quantum Veil, a fluctuation that did not conform to any known decay pattern. He reported it to his superior, who reported it to his, and after months of passing through layers of ancient, unhurried bureaucracy, the report finally reached the current High Counselor. A descendant of the same thought line as Valerius, the anomaly was growing. The veil, which should have been a perfect black-body sphere absorbing all energy, was beginning to emit faint structured radiation, gravitational ripples that made no sense. It was as if something was pushing on the cage not from the outside, but from within. The Concordance was disturbed. Their perfect solution was becoming imperfect. A new fleet was dispatched. Not a ceremonial guard, but a full-fledged battle group, led by Praetor Kalen of the Viridian Star Clans. Kalen was the epitome of the Concordance military ideal, logical, disciplined, and utterly ruthless when necessary. His people were warriors, but their way of war was like a form of mathematics, precise and without passion. He was given a simple directive: approach the Sol system, analyze the nature of the anomaly, and if the human contagion showed any sign of breaching their prison, he was to sterilize the entire system with extreme prejudice. The sentence of isolation would become a sentence of death. Praetor Kalen's flagship, the Unwavering Equation, slipped out of hyperspace a safe distance from the Quantum Veil. His fleet, 100 ships of stark geometric design, spread out in a perfect crescent formation. Before them hung the veil, a vast sphere of absolute blackness that blotted out the stars behind it. But it was no longer completely black. A faint, milky luminescence shimmered across its surface, like oil on water. "Status report?" Kalen's voice was a low, guttural monotone, a product of his species' dense atmosphere. He stood on his bridge, a towering reptilian figure encased in silver-blue battle armor. "The veil is active, Praetor," his science officer, a small, multi-limbed creature named Xylar, reported, his voice a series of precise clicks and whistles translated by the ship's computer. "Energy emissions are 5,000% above baseline dormancy. The gravitational fluctuations are impossible. They suggest the mass energy equivalent of a small nebula is contained within the veil. A single star system cannot generate this." Kalen processed this information. The conclusion was simple. Our sensors are malfunctioning. The veil's energy field is corrupting our readings. "Recalibrate and scan again, Praetor." Xylar clicked nervously. "We have recalibrated 3 times. The data remains consistent. The laws of physics as we understand them are being violated." This was an unacceptable statement to a mind like Kalen's. The laws of physics were not laws to be violated. They were absolute. "There is no violation," Kalen stated. "Only a lack of understanding. We will gain that understanding." He gave a new order. "Launch a Class 3 reconnaissance drone. Pierce the veil. Show me what is inside this cage." A sleek, silver drone detached from the unwavering equation and accelerated towards the shimmering black sphere. Its mission was simple: to cross the event horizon of the veil and transmit as much data as possible before being destroyed by the gravitational forces within. It was a suicide mission, but one that would provide them with the answers they needed. The drone struck the veil, but it did not pass through. The moment its metallic tip touched the shimmering surface, the entire veil flashed with a brilliant white light. An energy pulse, focused and precise, shot back along the drone's path, not with the chaotic force of a natural phenomenon, but with the surgical precision of a weapon. The drone and the mothership it had launched from were instantly vaporized, their component atoms scattered. A shocked silence fell upon the bridge of the unwavering equation. They had not just been resisted, they had been counterattacked. The prison had just demonstrated that it had a defense system. "Report!" Kalen roared. The veil reacted, Praetor," a stunned Xylar reported. "It did not just block the drone. It absorbed its energy, analyzed its trajectory, and fired back a perfectly calibrated response. That is not a natural barrier. It is a controlled weapon system." Before Kalen could process this new, impossible data point, something else happened. A new sensation washed over the bridge, over the entire fleet. It wasn't a sound or a light. It was a thought planted directly into the mind of every single crew member, from Kalen himself down to the lowest-ranking deckhand. The thought was calm, impossibly ancient, and resonated with a power that made the High Counselor's telepathy feel like a child's whisper. The thought formed itself into words, translated perfectly into the native language of every being that heard it. 5,000 years ago, you built a cage to contain a child you feared. The child has grown up. This cage is no longer your prison. It is our wall, and you are not welcome here. Leave this place, or you will be removed." Praetor Kalen stumbled back a step, his logical mind reeling. The primitives they had come to euthanize were speaking to them, not with crackling radio waves, but with the voice of gods. He looked at the shimmering veil, at the impossible nebula of energy readings his sensors were still screaming about. He had come here expecting to find a dead world, or perhaps a species that had bombed itself back to the Stone Age. He had come to correct a 5,000-year-old error in the galactic equation. Instead, he was beginning to suspect, with a cold dread that was utterly alien to his disciplined mind, that he and his entire fleet were about to become a rounding error in a new equation, one written by a humanity that had been left alone in the dark for far, far too long. The child had not consumed itself in fire. It had learned to control the fire, to shape it, to build with it, and it had spent 5 millennia building something unimaginable, just on the other side of that wall. The message, delivered directly into the minds of his entire fleet, left Praetor Kalen in a state of cognitive dissonance. His logical mind, trained to process data and probabilities, was struggling to reconcile the information. The historical archives described humans as chaotic, short-lived primitives. The beings who had just spoken to him were ancient, powerful, and utterly in control. It was a contradiction of the highest order. "Trace the source of that transmission," Kalen commanded, his voice tight with a tension he refused to acknowledge. "There is no source to trace." "Praetor," Xylar clicked, his manipulators flying across his console. It was not a broadcast. It did not travel through space. It simply was. It resonated on a quantum-entangled level, affecting every mind in our fleet simultaneously. The level of technology required to do that is beyond the Concordance. It is beyond anyone. Kalen's reptilian eyes narrowed. Fear was an illogical emotion, but the cold tendrils of it were beginning to wrap around his disciplined thoughts. They are bluffing. It is a psychological trick, a projection of power they do not possess. They have found a way to manipulate the veil, to use it as a speaker and a shield. But a shield can be broken. His own logic was a comfort, a life raft in a sea of impossibility. There had to be a rational explanation. "Praetor," Xylar interjected cautiously, "to them we are the primitives now. 5,000 years of isolated, focused development, with no external threats, no internal schisms, no distractions. What could a species like humanity achieve in that time? Our own technological advancement rate is less than 0.1% per century. Theirs was exponential even before their confinement." Kalen slammed a heavy three-fingered hand down on the command console, creating a loud thud that echoed on the silent bridge. "Enough speculation. We are the Viridian Star Clans. We are the Fist of the Concordance. We do not fear ghosts or riddles. Our purpose is clear. We will breach that veil and we will see the truth for ourselves." He turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare the fleet for a full energy barrage. Concentrate fire on a single point. No barrier can withstand the focused power of 100 starships. We will punch a hole through their wall." The Concordance fleet repositioned itself, their forms shifting from a crescent into a tight spearhead formation, all aimed at one specific coordinate on the veil's shimmering surface. Their main weapons, powered by harnessed singularities, began to charge. An unnatural light, a distortion in space itself, began to form at the prow of each vessel. Inside the human reality, the one the Concordance could not see, the warning came not on a screen, but as a shared awareness. Humanity, in its long isolation, had evolved beyond simple technology. They had integrated with it. Consciousness and computation had merged. The trillions of human minds living within their self-made cosmos were all part of a single vast network. The imminent attack was felt as a dissonant chord in the symphony of their existence. An entity that was once a woman named Admiral Gina Cassidy stood on a platform that was not truly a platform, overlooking a star that was not truly a star. She was ancient, her physical form long since shed and reformed countless times, now a graceful silhouette of swirling light and information. She was one of the many custodians of what they called the Genesis Sphere. "They are arrogant." Her thoughts rippled through the network, a message to all of humanity. "They still think in terms of brute force. They do not understand. The wall is not a shield. It is a converter." As the Concordance fleet unleashed its devastating barrage, 100 beams of raw cosmic power, enough to crack a continent, converged on the quantum veil. The impact was not an explosion. It was an inhalation. The veil, at the point of impact, did not shatter. It glowed, brightening from a milky luminescence to a blinding, incandescent white. It absorbed every single joule of the attack, the energy flowing across its surface like water being poured into a bowl. On the bridge of the unwavering equation, Kalen and his crew watched in stunned disbelief. Their ultimate weapon, their final argument, had been consumed without a trace. "Report," Kalen choked out. "All energy." "Absorbed," Xylar stammered, his clicks frantic. "The veil's energy level has increased exponentially. And Praetor, the nebula inside, it is growing. New energy signatures are appearing. They look like protostars. Praetor, they are using our attack as a power source." We are literally feeding them. The terrible truth crashed down upon Kalen with the force of a physical blow. This was not a wall to be broken down. It was a mouth to be fed. The humans had not just fortified their prison. They had turned it into a perpetual energy generator, powered by any and all external forces. Any attack would only make them stronger. A new thought, laced with something that felt disturbingly like amusement, echoed through the minds of the Cathar fleet. Thank you for the offering. Your contribution to our growth is appreciated. Now, this is your final warning. Leave. Kalen felt a surge of fury, a hot, chaotic emotion he had been trained to suppress. He was being mocked. He, a praetor of the Viridian star clans, was being treated like a foolish child. "This is not possible," he growled, more to himself than to his crew. "There must be a limit. A point of overload. Tactical. Prepare for a sustained, continuous barrage. We will force-feed them until they choke." But before he could give the order to fire again, humanity's response changed. The veil itself began to shift. The shimmering surface warped, and a section of it extruded outwards, forming a long, thin tendril of pure space-time. The tendril snaked through the void with impossible speed, not flying through space, but rewriting space in front of it. It moved towards the Concordance fleet not as an attack, but as a gesture. The tendril stopped a few kilometers from the unwavering equation, and then it began to tie itself into a knot. A complex, beautiful, and utterly impossible knot in the fabric of reality. It was a display of casual, effortless power that was more terrifying than any weapon. It was a message. This is what we can do to space itself. Imagine what we could do to your ships. Kalen stared at the impossible knot hanging in the void. His entire military doctrine was based on the predictable physics of projectiles and energy beams in three-dimensional space. How could he fight an enemy that could tie space into a pretzel? "Praetor," Xylar whispered, his perceptive antennae drooping in what the ship's computer translated as despair. "This is not war. This is pest control, and we are the pests." Kalen knew in that moment that a direct confrontation was suicide. Brute force was useless. He needed to understand what he was facing. He needed to see inside. He rescinded the attack order, his pride a bitter taste in his mouth. "Xylar," he commanded, his voice now low and measured. "That specialized scout vessel we have, the Pathfinder, the one equipped with the dimensional resonance imagers. Prepare it for launch. We cannot break down the front door, so we will find a window. I want a pilot to get as close as they can to the veil and use the imager to get a glimpse of what is inside that abomination." The Pathfinder was a small, nimble ship, crewed by a single, highly skilled pilot, a young Viridian named Rykor. His mission was not to fight, but to see. He took his vessel on a wide, sweeping arc around the veil, staying well outside the demonstrated range of its defenses. He activated the dimensional imager, a highly experimental piece of technology that didn't use sensors to see, but rather interpreted the quantum vibrations that bled through from adjacent realities. It was designed to map echoes of other dimensions, not to peer into a self-contained universe. No one knew if it would even work. As the first fragmented images began to resolve on Rykor's screen and were relayed back to the unwavering equation, a collective hush fell over the flagship's bridge. They were not seeing a star and a few planets. They were seeing a galaxy in miniature, thousands upon thousands of points of light swirling in graceful spiral arms. They were not the size of true stars, but they burned with the same light, each one a contained, perfectly stable fusion reaction. And orbiting these microsuns were planets, hundreds of them, thousands of them. Some were terraformed to look like the Earth of old, blue and green jewels. Others were crystalline worlds or gas giants of swirling, iridescent color. Vast, impossibly large structures, elegant rings and glowing spheres, drifted in the space between the stars, their surfaces glittering with the lights of civilization. It was not a prison. It was a work of art, a bespoke universe crafted with the patience of millennia and the power of gods. Humanity hadn't just survived their exile. They had used it to become creators of worlds. By the first stars, Xylar breathed. They didn't just build a new home. They built their own heaven. Kalen stared at the impossible image, his rigid worldview crumbling into dust. He had been sent to contain a virus. But the virus had not only survived, it had cured itself of the need for a host. It had built its own body, its own ecosystem, its own galaxy. And now, it was looking back at its former captors with an ancient, patient, and terrifying intelligence. The conflict had just risen to a level he could no longer comprehend, and he knew with chilling certainty that his fleet was no longer the threat. It was the witness to a power that would reshape the galaxy. The images from the Pathfinder scout ship fundamentally altered the nature of the conflict. Praetor Kalen was no longer a warden enforcing a quarantine. He was an explorer who had stumbled upon a new, undiscovered country, one whose borders were a wall of impossible physics. The sheer scale of what humanity had built was staggering. It defied every principle of energy conservation, thermodynamics, and cosmology that the Concordance held as absolute truth. "This data must be sent to the High Council immediately," Kalen declared, his voice a low rumble of awe and apprehension. "They need to see this. They need to understand what has become of the humans." "Praetor," Xylar interjected, his clicks sharp with urgency. "To transmit this data package through hyperspace would take cycles. By the time they receive it and formulate a response, the situation here could change drastically. We are operating on our own." Kalen knew the science officer was right. He was alone out here, facing a civilization that had weaponized the laws of nature. His initial shock was slowly being replaced by a cold, calculated analysis. The humans had shown their power, but they had not attacked his main fleet. They had disabled a single ship, delivered a warning, and then made a display of force. These were not the actions of a mindlessly aggressive species. They were the actions of a confident, mature power setting its boundaries. "They want us to leave," Kalen mused aloud. "But they have not forced us to leave. Why? They have demonstrated the ability to disable our ships and manipulate space. They could have eliminated us. Instead, they warn us. They show us." "Perhaps," Xylar offered, "they are proud. They want us to see what they have accomplished, to understand how wrong the Concordance was to imprison them." This concept, pride, was a difficult one for Kalen to process in this context. To the Viridian star clans, pride came from victory in battle, from the perfect execution of a logical strategy. This human pride seemed to stem from creation, from the act of building something beautiful and complex out of their isolation. It was a foreign, yet strangely compelling idea. He decided on a new, far riskier tactic. A display of force had failed. A passive observation was yielding incredible but limited information. He needed to communicate. But how do you knock on the door of a private universe? "Pilot Rykor," Kalen broadcast to the Pathfinder. "Your mission has changed. You will not just observe. You will approach the Veil, not with aggression. You will broadcast a standard open diplomatic frequency. You will request permission to enter." A wave of disbelief washed over Kalen's bridge crew. A praetor of the Concordance did not request permission. They took what they wanted. This was an unprecedented act of humility, a clear signal to the humans that the old rules no longer applied. In the cockpit of the Pathfinder, Rykor felt a tremor of fear. He was being asked to fly up to the wall that had vaporized a warship and gently asked to be let in. But he was a Viridian soldier, and his duty was absolute. He angled his small ship towards the shimmering blackness and began broadcasting the ancient, simple peace signal of the Concordance. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. The veil remained a silent, shimmering curtain. Then the voice, the same impossibly ancient and calm consciousness, echoed not just in Rykor's mind, but in the minds of the entire fleet. A bold request. "Your species has not changed. You still prod at that which you do not understand. Why should we allow a warden into the home of the prisoner?" It was Kalen who responded, his own thoughts projected from the bridge of his flagship, a crude and clumsy effort compared to the human's effortless resonance. "We are no longer wardens," he projected. "We are witnesses. We acted on 5,000-year-old information. That information is now obsolete. We seek understanding." There was another long pause. The entire Concordance fleet waited, their engines silent, their fates hanging on the decision of an entity they couldn't see. "Understanding is a worthy goal," the voice finally replied. "But it is a path walked, not a destination arrived at by force. Your request is being considered. Hold your position. Do not deviate. Do not arm any weapons. You are being watched. Then a new impossibility occurred. A perfect circle of the quantum veil directly in front of the Pathfinder seemed to dissolve. It did not explode or tear. It simply faded, revealing the star-dusted reality within. It was an opening, a gateway. The pilot may enter, alone. He will be our guest. The rest of your fleet will remain where they are. Any hostile move, any attempt to follow, and this gateway will close, and we will consider it an act of war. Kalen felt a surge of cold logic. It was a trap. They would take his pilot, take his ship, analyze his technology, and then destroy them. But it was also an opportunity, a chance to gain intelligence that was unobtainable any other way. The potential reward outweighed the risk to a single pilot. "Pilot Rykor," he commanded. "You have your orders. Proceed." With a deep breath, Rykor nudged his small ship forward, crossing the threshold from the familiar, dark universe into the bespoke galaxy of humanity. As he passed through the gateway, the universe behind him vanished, replaced by the swirling nebulae and manufactured suns of the Genesis sphere. His sensors went wild, trying to process a reality where the fundamental constants of physics were subtly but significantly different. Gravity was a fraction stronger. The speed of light was a fraction slower. It was a universe tuned and optimized by its creators. He was not met with fighters or weapons platforms. Instead, a gentle, unseen force took control of his ship, guiding it with smooth precision through the cosmos of humanity. He flew past Earth-like planets where he could see continents and oceans, past vast, crystalline rings where beings of light danced in intricate patterns. He saw things that his mind, steeped in the rigid logic of the Concordance, could barely comprehend. This was not just a civilization living in a pocket dimension. This was a civilization that had become a living ecosystem, a symbiotic network of consciousness and creation. The Pathfinder was brought to a gentle stop inside a vast, open structure that seemed to be woven from solidified light. The air shimmered and a figure coalesced before his ship. It was the form he had seen in his mind, the entity that called itself Admiral Gina Cassidy. She stood in the void, no spacesuit, no technology visible, her form a graceful cascade of light, her features ancient and serene. Rykor, against all his training, felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The Admiral's presence was not threatening. It was welcoming. "Welcome, pilot of the Viridian Star Clans." Her thoughts filled his mind, warm and clear. "You are the first outsider to enter our home in 5 millennia. Do not be afraid. We mean you no harm. What is this place?" Rykor thought, his own mental voice a clumsy shout in the quiet cathedral of her mind. "We call it the Genesis sphere," Cassidy explained, showing him images and concepts as she spoke. She showed him the early days after the exile, the despair, the anger. Then she showed him the turning point, the moment humanity realized their prison was also a laboratory, a closed system where they could experiment with the fundamental forces of reality without fear of outside interference. They turned their gaze inward, not outward. They mapped the quantum foam. They learned the language of string theory, and they began slowly, painstakingly, to edit their own reality. "You gave us a cell," her thoughts continued, a river of information flowing into Rykor's mind. "And in that cell, we found the keys to creation. We learned that consciousness is not a passenger in the universe, but a sculptor of it. We built our first star out of a shared dream. We terraformed our first world with a focused hope. This galaxy, you see, is the physical manifestation of the collective soul of our species, nurtured over 5,000 years." She showed him how they had mastered space-time, learning to control the veil not as a barrier, but as a lens, a tool. It was their shield, their power converter, and their gateway, all in one. They had not been pushing against their cage. They had been remodeling it into the front door of a mansion. "Your praetor seeks understanding," Cassidy concluded. "He believes we are a threat. Show him what you have seen. Tell him that we have no desire to return to your galaxy. Why would we? We have outgrown it. This home is all we need. All we ask is to be left in peace to continue our work." A new thought entered Rykor's mind, a question he had to ask. Your work? You have built a perfect universe. What is left to do? Admiral Cassidy's mental presence seemed to smile, a concept that radiated warmth and infinite patience. This? Oh, this is just our first draft. The gentle force returned Rykor's ship to the gateway. As he passed back into his own universe, the portal dissolving behind him, he was a changed being. He had been sent as a soldier to scout an enemy. He returned as an apostle, carrying a message that would shatter the foundations of the galactic concordance. He had seen the courage of a species that, when banned from the stars, simply decided to build better ones. The shock was no longer about their power. It was about their purpose. Pilot Rykor's report was not a simple transmission of data and images. It was a testament, delivered with the fervent conviction of a convert. He described the Genesis sphere not as a fortress or a weapon, but as a work of art, a living cathedral built on a scale that dwarfed the most ambitious projects of the Concordance. He spoke of a humanity that had transcended the physical, becoming beings of information and will, sculptors of reality itself. Praetor Kalen listened in stony silence on the bridge of the unwavering equation, the entire command crew bearing witness to Rykor's astonishing account. The idea that this was just their first draft was perhaps the most terrifying concept of all. It implied a trajectory of growth that was not just exponential, but creative, a power that was not just expanding, but evolving. They have no wish for conflict, Rykor concluded, his voice filled with an awe that bordered on reverence. Admiral Cassidy was clear. They want nothing from the old galaxy. They only wish to be left alone. A convenient desire, now that they possess the power to enforce it, Kalen stated, his analytical mind trying to find the strategic angle, the logical flaw. They show us their perfect creation. They claim they want peace, but they do so from a position of absolute strength. It could be the most sophisticated deception in galactic history. It is not a deception, Praetor, Rykor insisted. I felt it. Their serenity, their detachment. They are not like us anymore. War, conquest, territory, these are concepts I do not think they even consider. They are artists, not soldiers. Kalen fell silent. The entire foundation of his mission was crumbling. He had been sent to deal with a resurgent threat. Instead, he had found a transcendent one. His orders were to sterilize the system if the humans posed a danger. But how do you define danger? Was a being more dangerous simply because it was more powerful? The humans had not attacked, had not threatened conquest. Their only crime was to have become gods in the prison the Concordance had built for them. He knew what he had to do. He compiled Rykor's full report, the dimensional imaging data, and his own logs into a single data burst, and sent it on the long journey to the Concordance High Council. In his final summary, he laid out the stark, impossible truth and made a recommendation that he knew might be seen as treason. Cease all hostilities. Withdraw all forces. The human anomaly is not a threat to be neutralized, but a new cosmic power to be acknowledged. We cannot win a war against them, and we have no logical reason to start one. Our 5,000-year-old sentence is irrelevant. They have paroled themselves. But the galaxy moved at the speed of bureaucracy. While Kalen's message traveled, the old gears of the Concordance were already turning, driven by fear. The initial reports of the fleet's encounter, the destruction of a Concordance vessel, the impossible energy readings, had reached the High Council through a series of priority relays. They did not have Rykor's context. They only had the data of a powerful, unknown force that had emerged from the human prison, and they reacted as old, fearful empires always do. High Counselor Valerius's descendant, a being named Valerius IX, made a decision based on paranoia, not evidence. The humans had not died out. They had grown strong. They were an existential threat, a potential rival to the eons of Concordance supremacy. He would not allow it. He invoked an ancient, forbidden protocol, one reserved for threats that could unravel reality itself. He ordered the deployment of the Cosmic Anchor. The Cosmic Anchor was not a traditional weapon. It was a device of cosmological warfare. It was designed to create a targeted, localized destabilization of space-time. It didn't blow things up. It unraveled them, collapsing pocket dimensions and erasing quantum instabilities by forcibly resetting reality to its baseline state. It was a weapon so dangerous that using it risked causing permanent damage to the fabric of the surrounding universe. Valerius, in his terror, had decided to burn down the entire house to kill a single, terrifying spider. A second heavily armed concordance fleet, carrying the components of the anchor, was dispatched to the Sol system with one chilling order: collapse the Genesis sphere. When the second fleet arrived, Kalen was horrified. Their commander, a grim, fanatical Viridian traditionalist named Praetor Vorlag, hailed him. "Praetor Kalen!" Vorlag's voice boomed. "By order of the High Council, your command is rescinded. My fleet is assuming operational authority. We are here to deploy the anchor and erase this human aberration." "You cannot!" Kalen protested, his voice filled with a desperate urgency. "You do not understand what you are doing. They are not hostile. This is a monumentally reckless act." "My orders are from the High Council," Vorlag stated coldly. "They have deemed the risk acceptable. The human experiment is over. Prepare your fleet to assist." Kalen knew he had a choice: obey the orders of a distant, terrified council, or trust what he had seen with his own eyes. For the first time in his life, logic and duty were in direct conflict. He chose logic. "I will not assist in an act of unprovoked genocide against a peaceful civilization. My fleet will stand down, then stand aside, or you will be erased with them," Vorlag snarled, and cut the communication. Vorlag's fleet moved into position, massive, specialized ships forming a ring around the quantum veil. They began to deploy the cosmic anchor, its components linking together to form a colossal device that warped the space around it, starlight bending and twisting as it powered up. Inside the Genesis sphere, the deployment of the anchor was felt as a deep, sickening tremor in the fabric of their reality. The symphony of their existence was being threatened by a wave of pure, chaotic noise. Admiral Gina Cassidy's serene consciousness rippled with a profound sadness. They did not listen. Her thought echoed to all of humanity. Their fear has blinded them. They seek to destroy a creation they cannot comprehend. A debate, faster than light, raged through the human network. Could they fight? Could they use their reality-shaping powers to dismantle the anchor before it fired? The consensus was grim. The anchor operated on a cosmological principle that was brutally direct. It didn't attack their dimension. It pulled the plug on the entire sector of space their dimension was rooted in. To fight it from within would be like trying to repair a house while the foundation was being vaporized. They had only one desperate, heartbreaking option left. A plan that had existed only as a theoretical possibility, a final what-if scenario they had prayed they would never need. They called it the Severance. The Genesis sphere was not just a pocket universe. It was an engine. Its manufactured stars, its controlled gravitational fields, its mastery over space-time could be reconfigured. They could, in theory, detach their entire reality from its anchor point in the Sol system and become a truly independent, mobile universe. A world ship on the grandest scale imaginable. But the process required an almost infinite amount of energy, and more importantly, a single, conscious mind to act as the focal point, to guide the severing of the final threads that bound them to their home dimension. It was a task that would require the pilot to merge their consciousness with the fabric of the sphere itself. It was not a mission one could return from. It was the ultimate act of sacrifice. A young man named Kai, one of the new humans born within the sphere, a brilliant reality shaper and dreamer, volunteered. He was not a soldier, but an artist, one who painted with nebulae and sculpted with gravity. He saw it as his ultimate creation, to pilot an entire galaxy to safety. As Kai made his way to the heart of the sphere, to the chamber that would become his cockpit and his tomb, Admiral Cassidy sent one final, desperate message not to Vorlag's fleet, but to Kalen's, Praetor Kalen. Your council has chosen destruction. We have chosen life. We are about to attempt the impossible. We will not survive the firing of their weapon, so we must leave. Witness this. Remember it, and tell the galaxy what their fear has cost them. Kalen watched as Vorlag's fleet brought the cosmic anchor to full power. A terrible, silent scream of energy began to build, a visible rupture in space. At the same time, the milky luminescence of the quantum veil began to change. It contracted, pulling inward, the entire vast nebula of the Genesis sphere, collapsing into a single, infinitesimally small, blindingly bright point of light. All the stars, all the worlds, all the souls of humanity, compressed into a singularity of their own making, a final desperate seed of a new universe. The climax was at hand. A race between a weapon that could erase reality and a sacrifice that would attempt to escape it entirely. The final moments were a silent cosmic ballet of terrifying beauty. On one side, the cosmic anchor, a monument to the Concordance's fear, pulsed with a sickening, reality-distorting energy, its ring of ships like priests at a dark altar. On the other, the Genesis sphere, humanity's masterpiece of creation, condensed itself, pulling its entire self-made galaxy into a point of light so bright it seemed to burn a hole in the void. Praetor Kalin and his crew could only watch, their sensors screaming, their logical minds shattered by the scale of the forces at play. They were witnessing a battle not of ships, but of philosophies. The destructive power of fear versus the defiant, creative power of hope. Inside that single point of light, Kai's consciousness expanded to become the universe he was saving. He felt every star, every planet, every one of the trillions of human souls as if they were his own cells. He felt the final threads connecting his reality to the old one, the universe of his ancestors. And with a single, focused act of will, an exertion of pure, selfless love for the home he had helped create, he cut them. At that exact instant, Praetor Vorlag gave the command to fire, a wave of pure spatial disruption. A tsunami of uncreation erupted from the cosmic anchor and surged towards the Sol system. It was a force that would have unwritten the history of the Earth, collapsed the sun, and erased every trace that humanity had ever existed. But it was too late. The blinding point of light that was the Genesis sphere, now untethered from its home dimension, did something that defied all known physics. It tore a new hole in space-time. Not a wormhole or a hyperspace window, but a clean, sharp rift into a higher dimensional plane, a pathway into a new, uncharted substrate of reality. With a flash that momentarily blinded every sensor in both Concordance fleets, the singularity plunged into the rift, and the rift sealed behind it, leaving nothing but an echo of gravitational waves and a profound, echoing silence. The cosmic anchor's wave of destruction washed over an empty system. It struck the space where the quantum veil had been and dissipated, its purpose void, its terrible power wasted on nothingness. The Sol system was still there, the familiar yellow sun, the blue marble of Earth, the silent rocky planets, but it was empty. The cage was gone, and the prisoner had vanished. Aboard Vorlag's flagship, there was stunned confusion. Their ultimate weapon had fired, and their target had simply ceased to exist a fraction of a second before impact. Their displays showed a perfectly normal, mundane star system, as if the last 5,000 years of impossible energy readings had been nothing but a collective hallucination. Aboard the unwavering equation, the mood was different. It was not confusion, it was awe. Kalin stood before his view screen, staring at the empty space where a universe had just been. "They did it," he whispered. They actually did it. Admiral Cassidy's final message had been a promise, and humanity had kept it. They had not been destroyed. They had ascended. They had taken their entire creation and sailed it into an unknown ocean, leaving the old world behind forever. Praetor Vorlag, his fanatical certainty shattered, hailed Kalin, his voice strained and thin.
"What happened?"
"Where did they go?" "They went home," Kalin replied, the words resonating with a truth he now fully understood. "A home they built for themselves, and one they have now taken with them far beyond your reach, and far beyond your fear." The emotional resolution for the Concordance was a slow, agonizing dawn of shame and regret. Kalin's fleet and Vorlag's fleet returned to the core worlds not with news of a victory, but with two conflicting, equally terrifying stories. Vorlag spoke of an enemy that had mysteriously vanished. Kalin spoke of a civilization that had transcended, driven away by the Concordance's own paranoia. His report, complete with Rykor's testimony, spread through the halls of power, a quiet indictment of the Council's rash, fearful decision. The High Council was thrown into turmoil. They had committed a profound galactic crime, attempting to exterminate a species that had offered no threat and had failed in the most spectacular way possible. They had not destroyed humanity. They had immortalized them. They had turned a historical footnote into a legend that would be told for eons. A story of a caged species that broke not just its bars, but the very concept of a cage. The Viridian Star clans, Kalen's people, were deeply affected. Their philosophy was based on logic and honor. There was no honor in what the Council had ordered. A schism grew, with Kalen as its reluctant figurehead arguing for a new era of understanding, of acknowledging the limits of their own knowledge. The galaxy, he argued, was not an equation to be solved, but a mystery to be explored, and they had just driven its most profound mystery away. On Earth, now a quiet, ordinary planet, a new chapter began. The gravitational echoes of the severance had subtly altered the planet's orbit, causing mild but noticeable climate shifts. It was as if the planet itself sighed in the sudden absence of its children. But life continued, a silent testament to the species that had been born there. The story ends not with a bang, but with a legacy. The Concordants, humbled and fractured, began to look at the galaxy with new eyes, wondering what other wonders they had overlooked in their arrogant certainty. They searched the cosmic background radiation for any sign of the Genesis sphere, any hint of where humanity had gone, but found nothing. They were truly gone, a ghost that haunted the galactic consciousness. Kalen, now a respected but controversial figure, would often stand on the bridge of his ship and look out at the endless sea of stars. He had been the last jailer of humanity, and he had become their first true witness. He knew that the Concordants had not banned humanity from the stars. They had only banned them from their stars, and in doing so, they had forced humanity to create their own, brighter and more beautiful than they could have ever imagined. The child had not just left its room. It had left the house entirely and was now wandering a new, infinite landscape of its own making, forever free. The silence from the Sol system was no longer the silence of a prison. It was the silence of an empty nest,